Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to visit, to view this webinar that we are having, one of the most important webinars I believe I've ever conducted to address the reopening of Maryland and the nation. We are at a critical juncture today. This shutdown is rapidly becoming more deadly than the actual disease that it was intended to prevent. And we can no longer afford to remain shut down. People are losing their jobs, they're losing their careers, they're losing their businesses, and in many cases, they're losing their lives. People who are prevented from going to the doctor for checkups and for quote unquote elective surgery are missing extremely important doctor appointments and surgeries. What do you say to the woman who has cancer and she was scheduled to get an operation, but that operation has to be put off for 2 months or 3 months because it's elective, and then in the meantime, that cancer metastasizes? That person is going to die because of this shutdown. And it's insane the way they have created this. For example, I have a friend who went to the hospital. He had heart failure, and he went to the hospital to get a stent. And they told him to go home because it was elective surgery. And he said to me, "Jim, so what am I supposed to do? Sit here at home and wait to die?" While meanwhile, the abortion clinics are open and abortion on demand is available. And why is it that we have big box shopping companies like Walmart, Costco are open? Walmart can sell electrical equipment, TVs and such, but you can't get it at Best Buy. That's crazy. You can go to the grocery store and get all kinds of groceries, and you can go to get your necessary marijuana, but you can't get elective surgery for cancer. It's insane. But it's not merely insane, it's unconstitutional. And we're going to talk about all the aspects of this shutdown that are wrong. We're talking about its constitutionality. We're going to talk about its law enforcement impacts. We're also going to talk about the disease itself and how we know that it was actually a bioweapon inflicted on the world, whether on purpose or by mistake is anybody's guess, by the communist Chinese. And then we're going to talk about some ways that we can safely reopen the economy. We have tonight some really incredible guests. We have Sheriff Richard Mack. He's the founder and director of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He and 6 other sheriffs challenged the Brady Law right up to the Supreme Court and won. So now you don't have to go, if you're going to buy a gun, you don't have to go to a gun store and leave it up to the state police or the local police to slow ball your application as they supposedly check your background. Now it's an instant check. I have problems with that as well, but it's better than what we had before, and we can thank Sheriff Mack for that. He has also been a lifelong law enforcement officer, hostage negotiator, undercover narcotics officer, and many other things. This is a man, a dedicated lifetime of service to our communities and our nation. It is really, really my great honor to have him on here tonight. We also have another local hero this time. His name is Chuck Jenkins, Sheriff of Frederick County. He's a former Marine, and he's also serving as the 2nd Vice President of the Maryland's Sheriff's Association. Sheriff Jenkins has testified on illegal immigration to Congress many times. You can see him on Fox News from time to time talking about that issue. And he has taken a very brave stand, one of the few counties, and at one point, the only county that was engaged in Immigration and Customs Enforcement 287G program, which allows state and local governments to detain illegal aliens and alert the ICE that they have these people in detention. And of course, he's faced endless opposition from the hard left for that and the illegal alien support groups in Maryland, of which there are many. He's been sued every year when this thing comes up for a vote again. The room is filled with all these lefty lunatics, but he has done a great job and he stood up, and he continues to get reelected because the people of Frederick County know what a great job he does and how much he is dedicated to them. It's an honor to have Sheriff Jenkins with us. We also have my friend, longtime friend, Clare Lopez, formerly Vice President of the Center for Security Policy. She's the founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC. She's a lifetime former CIA case officer. You know, that's the agent, you know, the secret agent kind. And she is also an expert on bioweapons. And so we're going to have Clare talking to us all about what this COVID-19 really is and why it acts the way it does. It's a very interesting question. We also have Benjamin Nieuwsma. He's the founder and CEO of Navigo, and he created this amazing tool which evaluates the risk of opening up economies based on individual county risk. And it's a very in-depth, very clever, very well put together model that tells you every single day how much it's costing in terms of dollar costs, job loss, suicide, and other factors for keeping the economy shut down versus how much we would benefit by opening up and what the risk is on many dimensions to opening up. This is a brilliant thing, and he, at my request, I'm very grateful to him. He created a model just for Maryland, and he's going to show that to us tonight. Finally, my friend, a longtime friend, Wyoming rancher Mike Elmore, is going to talk to us about the food supply chain issues. Now, you know, I just have this kind of fantasy vision of cattle ranching where you're out on horses and you're, you know, lassoing the cattle and getting them to go into the pen and all this stuff. But it's really a very, very sophisticated business, and you have to do things timing just right. And he's going to explain to us why this situation with the shutdown has created a dangerous, dangerous bottleneck that could potentially reduce our protein supplies by up to 80%. And gratefully, President Trump finally took action. He used the Defense Production Act to demand that food processors, meat processors stay open. And hopefully that will fix things, and we will learn about that from Mike Elmore. So I think you've heard enough out of me, probably, at least for the time being anyway. But I have to, before I do anything, since I am a candidate for the US Congress, I would be remiss if I didn't spend a couple of minutes talking to you about my campaign and hopefully convincing you to support my campaign through a variety of means. Most importantly, and it's on the homepage there right now, I think maybe my picture is blocking the view. Oh no, there's a donate button right down there in the right-hand corner. Please consider your most generous donation to this campaign. We have to take back the U.S. House of Representatives. I love Maryland. I raised my children here, and we've lived here, and I intend to stay here for the rest of my life. But the left is bleeding people out of the state. The taxes are high and increasing. The regulations are absurd. We have a Republican governor, but that Republican governor has imposed one of the most restrictive shutdowns in the country. And it does not look like it's going to let up. These things, all these things have to change. And I felt that I could no longer spend the time that I've spent. I've spent 18 years writing about these issues, speaking about these issues, consulting about these issues. And it's very difficult to get that voice because, as you know, we, the conservative side, are being systematically shut down. We are being shut down by the big tech, Google, Facebook, Twitter. We are also being shut down at individual venues. They get threatened by Antifa, they get calls from left-wing legislators, and everybody runs for cover. And the people like myself, who were supposed to show up and speak, are not allowed to do so. This is a free country. We have a First Amendment, and they are trying to destroy that. Why? Because we are the ones telling you what's happening. We are the ones telling the truth, and we are the ones who are dedicated to returning our nation to its constitutional foundations, the rule of law, and limited government with much more power delegated to the states and much less power in the central government and scads left spending. We are dedicated to these things. We are dedicated to keeping this country alive. So please go to my website, look at my endorsements, read my blog. I have a great blog with a lot of good information on it. And most importantly, go to the donate page and please donate, because unfortunately, the only way we can win what we need to win is with enough money to get the message out there. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Sheriff Mack first, and he's going to talk about the constitutional issues of this shutdown. He's much better positioned to talk about it than I am, or practically anybody else. He has had to take this fight at one time to the Supreme Court, and he won. And he is a brilliant guy, great guy, and very articulate in explaining the constitutional issues. So, Sheriff Mack, welcome. Great to have you. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a real honor to be with you and the other distinguished guests on this panel. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar. Oh, and by the way, I am going to donate to your campaign. You totally convinced me. Any candidate that can say the word Constitution without choking, I definitely get behind that one. We're proud of you for running. Thank you for having the courage to run. You've actually given us a constitutional choice. And speaking of the Constitution, how is it that the Constitution applies to what's going on today? Well, there is never a time in our country that you can suspend individual liberty or suspend the Constitution, and then our politicians will promise to give it back when the crisis is over. That should never be trusted. I don't trust it. I believe that Americans can fight this, but if we're confined to our quarters and on house arrest, it will be impossible for us to fight. And this should not have lasted this long. If the government, like Trump has done, Trump has said these are guidelines. Every governor should have followed that lead. These self-appointed dictators in some of these states is wrong, and including the Republican in my state. Governor Ducey just announced yesterday that anybody who opens up their restaurant or their business without his permission will be fined $2,500, will go to jail for 6 months, and if they have one, they'll lose their liquor license. And that should never be. Quite frankly, because Thomas Jefferson said, in our Republican nation, government can persuade and reason with the people, but government cannot force the people. And this is where we're missing the boat. The Constitution completely allows for self-governance, that I make my own choices, that I work that out with my family, and that I do have a responsibility to take care of my family first, and then my neighbors and my community. And I will do that, but don't force me. Don't force me to do that. And none of these orders should be followed by any sheriff or any peace officer in the country, because they are also sworn guards of the Republic. They are sworn protectors of our Constitution. And this Constitution protects our God-given rights. And there's not a man or woman on this planet who has any authority or right to take my God-given rights away. Not for one day, not for 1 hour, and certainly not for 1 month or even a year, as some have already proposed. I'm not willing to destroy America and everything that made her great for this coronavirus threat, especially when we can't even get a straight answer on any of our medical questions about it. But even if it were infecting everyone in the country, I would never support the destruction of liberty for an effort to get rid of this disease. We can do it together, but only if we are free. And right here, I have probably the most valuable book that anybody in the country could have in your front pocket. And it's called The Victory for State Sovereignty, because it is a review of the case. The only time sheriffs sued the federal government and won a landmark decision at the U.S. Supreme Court. Let me read just an excerpt or two from it. First, on page 5, it says, "We have held, however, that state legislatures are not subject to federal direction." Does everybody understand that? So state employees, state legislatures, and county and city legislatures are not subject to federal direction. I would also go a little bit further and even say the governors really can't mandate to the counties and cities the way that they're doing right now. An order from the governor is not law. It is not law. It is pretend law, and pretend legislation is not law. And this is what I would answer every governor in the country who are trying to make vegetable seeds against the law, and who are trying to make going to church against the law, and arresting parishioners in parking lots in Mississippi who are there listening in their cars, still practicing social distancing, and they arrest them or cite them into court with $500 fines. Are we not intelligent enough or sensitive enough to know when we've gone too far? Isn't there one principle of liberty that we can all agree on that would be sacred and that none of us could ever violate, no matter how much we disagree with certain religions or how they practice? Isn't there one principle of freedom for which America was originally founded as a safe haven for religious liberty. And here we are today in 2020, arresting a pastor in Mississippi, arresting a pastor by the sheriff himself, Sheriff Cronister in Florida, taking the pastor to jail and fingerprinting him and photographing him, kind of like what we did to Rosa Parks on December 1st, 1955. I would never have arrested Rosa Parks. Why are we arresting people today for exercising their God-given rights? And I'll end my preliminary presentation with a quote from Justice Scalia in the Mack Prince case. Again, the only time sheriffs ever sued the federal government and won. And it goes like this. I don't need to open the book. I've got it right here. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. Let me say that one more time. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we may resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day, end quote. Folks, there will always be a crisis of the day. Government will create them or make them up or exacerbate them, all for one reason, to gain control over us. We cannot allow it now. We must nip this in the bud. It must not continue. I mutually pledge to each other, or we mutually pledge to each other, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to this holy cause. Thanks.
Wow. That's why I wanted you on. That was great. I love that. And I love that. And, you know, when you had your interview that I first saw, which inspired me to invite you on, you had that same quote, protecting us from our own best intentions. That's good. That's great, because so many bad things have done. Practically every bad thing that has ever been done by the government since the 1930s has been done under the mantle of good intentions. It's amazing. It's amazing. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to move on to my friend Sheriff Chuck Jenkins over in Frederick County. And as I said before, Chuck is one heck of a law enforcement officer, and he, unlike unfortunately too many sheriffs, understands both his power and his duty. And he understands that he's not beholden to all of these other politicians, and he's not afraid to do what's right, regardless of what other people say, think, and try to do. So, Chuck, it's great to have you here. Why don't you tell us about this COVID crisis shutdown from your perspective? I know you have a lot to say about it.
I do. Thank you, Jim. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I do need to make a correction. I was not a Marine. I regret to say I didn't serve in the military, so I will make that correction. But I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about what we see from a law enforcement perspective in Maryland, in Frederick County specifically, in regard to the COVID-19. And I can speak to, as being a full-service sheriff, which means I manage the detention center, law enforcement operations in the county, and also provide security in the court. So this COVID-19 has affected everything, all facets of law enforcement, detention, and the court processes. I'm really concerned, Jim, about what we're going to do on the other end of this, how we're going to come out of this, because what I see here in regard, everything now is focused. We are consumed by COVID-19. I mean, 24/7, it's pounded into the public. This is the crisis of the hour, the crisis of the day. One of my main concerns right now is a lot of sheriffs, a lot of police chiefs have taken their eye off the ball as to what we do normal day-to-day operations. So I've had to tell my guys, listen, limit your interaction with the public. Don't make arrests unless they're absolutely necessary. And sometimes, you know, you can't avoid them all the time, but there are situations where you can and you should avoid right now. You know, we're not enforcing the traffic laws like we should. You know, domestics are up immensely. Domestic situations, we have protective orders. We have people getting hurt in their homes with domestics. We've got heroin overdoses that are still as many as there were prior to going into this crisis. So all the things we dealt with, all the law enforcement issues are still out there. Unfortunately, most law enforcement now is spending their time watching to see if there's too many people at a birthday party, watching to see if they're wearing a mask at a store, whether they're going to or from an essential business. You know, we're not doing that. I told my men and women, I said, you're not going to stop cars to ask people where they're going and why. You know, we're not out there heavy-handed. Sheriff Mack made a great point, and this is how we're doing our job. I do think these orders have gone too far, okay? But what we're doing is trying to convince people. Americans don't like to be ordered what to do. I think we would all agree with that. So in our jobs out there every day, and I'm telling my men and women, let's get out there, let's reason with people, let's explain the order, the reason why. And so far in doing that, trying to persuade people this is the right thing right now, because we've got no pushback. We've not had to make an arrest. We just haven't had any problems whatsoever. And I credit the people of Frederick County for that. Talk about the detention center. And this is what really concerns me, that a lot of governors across the country, a lot of elected officials have decided the right thing to do is to empty the jails. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. People that commit crimes and belong in jail to be punished and make accountable for what the crimes they committed need to serve their sentences. We're very fortunate here in Frederick County. We've kept the COVID-19, the virus, out of the jail so far. My men and women have done a great job doing that. We've created a bubble around it. But I'm getting beat up every day by the same people who criticize my immigration enforcement. Those same people want me to open the doors of the jail and let people go. They said, Sheriff, let out the low-level offenders. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have low-level offenders in jail anymore. They just simply don't go to jail. The criminal justice system is already weakened, okay? If we continue to go down this road and allow people to be released and suspend their sentences and just simply cut them loose and not serve their debts to society, where are we going to end up? We're going to end up with a lawless society. That's what I'm concerned about. So, you know, again, I have to fight this issue every day. And what people don't understand is not Sheriff Jenkins' decision. I run the operations of the detention center, okay? It's up to the courts. It's up to the judges. Defense attorneys can take their sentenced clients in before a judge and get a modification on their sentence. You know, pretrial inmates can have their bonds reviewed, can ask to be released on PR. I'm advocating to our local judges they not do that. Let these inmates, these convicted persons, serve their sentences. Otherwise, like I say, on the other end of this, where's it going to go? This is the first step in taking one of the foundational pieces out of the criminal justice system. The courts right now are closed pretty much. The criminal dockets are not being conducted. No traffic dockets. The courts are open for emergency hearings such as juvenile detentions, protective orders for domestics, or hearings that have to be conducted immediately. The judges are available. The courts are open. Very, very limited. The court cases are backed up by the thousands, and that's going to continue. I know right now in Maryland, at least, the courts are suspended. I think they reopen in full on June 8th. Now, what's that going to create on the other end of that? What I'm really concerned about there, you're going to have serious people convicted or people charged with serious crimes are going to plea bargain. You're going to see an enormous amount of pleas just to empty the dockets, just so the cases don't have to go to court. You're going to have people who are probably shouldn't be released on recognizance, going to be released. You're going to have just such a backlog of cases. We don't know where this is going to go. So all in all, you know, I'm really concerned about what we're going to see on the other end of this. And I'm also, like Sheriff Mack, listen, I'm concerned about where we're going to go in terms of civil liberties and constitutional rights because, listen, Americans can't be restricted. They shouldn't be restricted. And that's just what our Constitution says. And as a sheriff, it's my responsibility to balance the enforcement of the laws with the protection of an individual's constitutional rights, and I intend to do that. So, you know, again, where is this all going to end? I think it's time to start opening things up. I know here locally in Frederick County, there are businesses that have been devastated. I know people are becoming impatient. I think after we get through this little rainy period and the weather gets nice, then people are going to really get anxious to get outside and live their lives, and they should be allowed to live their lives. like you said, I don't know who to believe anymore. I mean, we watch this stuff 24/7. We listen to elected officials, to politicians. We listen to health experts. But who do we really believe? Who can we believe? That's one of the biggest problems I have anymore. So from a law enforcement perspective, I'm afraid things are really going to change. My men and women are still focused on what we should be doing every day. We're enforcing the laws that are broken. We're investigating crimes. We're protecting the public from the bad guys. And when we have to, we're gonna lock them up and put them in jail. So we haven't taken our eye off the ball, and I don't intend to. So that's kind of where I'll wrap up, and I'll just wait for some questions.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very concerning, and it is impossible to know what to believe. There's so much contrasting and conflicting information out there. It's really hard to get a handle on it. But one thing I'm pretty certain of is that regardless, we need to open up, because as far as I'm concerned, I'll go out, and if I get COVID-19, well, so be it. But it's more important that we just open things up and let things run as they should, because if we don't, we're going to lose this country. And, you know, however many people die from COVID is going to be irrelevant, because we are a world leader, and our nation will collapse. And you know as well as I do that the various bad guys, the bad actors around the world, not least of which is communist China, are just chomping at the bit to jump in and take our place. So this is a situation with international implications, serious international implications over and above our own constitutional concerns and all the other things. It is really literally threatening. We need to get going again. And you know, that's a perfect segue to my next guest, Clare Lopez, who, as I said in the introduction, is a 30-year veteran CIA case officer and very brilliant lady. I've known her for many years. She's a good friend, and she is also an expert on bioweapons. And I'm going to have Clare come in and talk about that whole aspect of it, because I think it's something that I didn't understand very well, and I understand it a lot better after having talked to her. So, Clare, why don't you take it away now?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jim. Very glad to be with you and with your other distinguished guests. We're in very good company here tonight, and thanks to all of you who are online watching us this evening. I hope you find this helpful. So what I wanted to do was outline a little bit about what we're up against. What started all of this? What is coming against us? And to do that, I want to begin to set the scene by recommending to you 3 books, all right, that I think define the Chinese leadership and where it's coming from and what forms its worldview, its Weltanschauung, if you will. So let me begin with a book that I should have read a long time ago, but I've just now finished, and it is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. This is the particular copy of that book that I have here. Sun Tzu, of course, lived somewhere about 300 BC, and he wrote this manual of war, The Art of War. A lot of it has to do with very practical considerations of terrain, the mountains, and the river crossings and such as that. But some of the best lessons that are conveyed in this timeless work that, by the way, every Chinese leader knows and has read, are about how to fight without fighting, how to win without fighting, how to subdue the enemy without fighting, through what Sun Tzu would call clever operations. All right, let me mention another book. It is Unrestricted Warfare. Okay, Unrestricted Warfare is, as you can see, a rather slim volume. Paperback is the one I've got here. written in 1999 by two Chinese colonels in the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. And I would describe it as a manual, a handbook for warfare, except that they make many of the same points. And I'm sure that these two colonels who wrote this were very familiar with Sun Tzu and his lessons. And so their manual of warfare, unrestricted warfare, is really a lot about spheres of warfare that perhaps we in the West have not considered as warfare until now, but very clearly listed in black and white in the book. I will just mention a few examples from page 123, areas, spheres of warfare that the Chinese consider absolutely fair game, open season, that we perhaps have not taken such good care to recognize. Let me just list a few of these areas. Atomic warfare, diplomatic warfare. Diplomatic warfare. Do we think of diplomacy as warfare? They do. Financial warfare. See how Beijing right now is threatening Australia. Why? Because Australia had the nerve to call out the Communist Party of China and lay blame where blame is due. The Chinese regime has retaliated by threatening a boycott of Australian goods. That's what you call economic warfare. Very specifically, we come to this one, biochemical warfare. Not just about the coronavirus either. The Communist Party of China is involved in the production and the trafficking of fentanyl, for example, that killed 32,000 Americans in the year 2018 alone. 32,000 just from fentanyl, most of which came from China. All right, that is chemical warfare. What we're looking at with the coronavirus, that is biological warfare. A couple more here, psychological warfare, ideological warfare. You get the idea. Lots of areas that they call warfare, and they have every intention of becoming the global hegemon, to take our place, to replace us, America, as the world power, the world power. And it doesn't mean that their armies are going to march, the planes are going to fly. That's not what they're talking about, not invasion. What they're talking about is domination by all of these other means, including domination of high tech, Huawei, 5G. Think about those things. All right, let me mention one last book, because this has to do with the Chinese leadership's intent to replace the United States as the world power. And this book is called The 100-Year Marathon. It is by Michael Pillsbury, an excellent scholar of China who has served in presidential administrations going back to the 1970s, originally in the Nixon administration and beyond, for 20 or more years after that, a very strong proponent of the outreach to China, welcoming China into the World Trade Organization, for example, believing that by drawing China into the world network of trade and nation states, that China would gradually open up and become more of a liberal Western-style democratic country. Of course, that's not true. Michael Pillsbury knows that now, and this book, 100-Year Marathon, writes about that. The 100-year reference is to the years between 1949, when Mao Zedong ran the revolution, won the revolution in China against Chiang Kai-shek, and took over the rule of China, 1949, 100 years to the year 2049, when the Chinese leadership, the Communist Party of China, fully expects that they will have replaced and defeated us and taken our place as the world power. Now, let me just mention along these lines one last reference here, and that is back in 2018. The People's Republic of China President Xi Jinping declared that he had begun, quote, a new 30 years war with the United States. I'm sure you'll recognize that reference to one of the most devastating periods of warfare on the European continent that ever happened and decimated the population there. That's what he's talking about. He used that reference because it's to the West, and he knows that we would understand that. All right, let me move quickly to the Chinese Communist Party's offensive biological warfare program. Let me say first, I don't know why our senior leadership, be it academia, be it our national security, our elected officials, media, do not talk about the fact that China has one of the most advanced, one of the most sophisticated offensive biological warfare programs in the world. They work on things, everything from anthrax to Ebola to plague to smallpox, and yes, the full family of the coronaviruses. So unfortunately, the United States had some part in what we're facing right now. During the Obama administration back in 2014, actually prior to 2014, the Obama administration, through the Cabinet Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institutes of Health, funded a broad grant, a funding grant, amounting to a total of around $3.7 million to China for coronavirus research. Now, that went to a group, a broad overall group that is called the, let's see, what are they called? It's been cut off now. The Eco Health Alliance. Doesn't that sound great? The Eco Health Alliance, of which the Wuhan Institute of Virology is a member. So the money went overall to all of these groups to research the coronavirus. Now you can say, well, we need to be researching coronaviruses because they're deadly. SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, the everyday influenza flu. They're all coronaviruses. So is the common cold, coronavirus. Of course we should be researching them. But where does it cross the line between offensive biological warfare, which is intended to create a biological warfare agent, and defensive biological warfare research, which is intended to create drugs and perhaps vaccines? Where's the line? Well, I'm not sure that that is a very clearly defined line. And I'm also not sure that our National Institutes of Health knows where that line is either. In any case, at some point about 2014, the Obama administration became convinced that this kind of research going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which had to do with the coronavirus, was dangerous. And so it was paused. They held up the money. The Obama administration held up the money. At some point further on, and I'm not completely sure myself which year it was later, but during the Trump administration, after 2017, the funding somehow resumed. And again, at least 700,000 of it went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is China's only declared BSL-4, Biosafety Level 4 institute laboratory for the study of these kinds of viruses and pathogens. Now, you may have heard, if you've been watching some of the press conferences, that media brought this issue up to President Trump just a day or a few days ago, this past week. And the president was unaware that funding had been going to this institute. He cut it off. It's cut off now completely, but the damage is done. And I refer you to one more thing to read, and that is an article I wrote called Made in China. It is posted at the website of the Citizens Commission on National Security, www.ccnationalsecurity.org. And that paper outlines a lot of the kind of offensive biological warfare work going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Well, what did they do? What was so damaging? And here I give a hat tip to a very good friend of mine, an American by the name of Jill Bellamy, who is a public health and preparedness expert who lives and works in Europe. And she is an expert in these areas and helped me to understand a lot of it. What were they doing at that institute? Well, They're bioengineers, and I will call them bioengineers, bioweaponeers. At that institute, we're working on coronaviruses, something called gain of function. What that means is they were trying to make the coronavirus more efficient at latching onto human cells, more efficient at penetrating those cells, and more efficient at hijacking human cells, especially in the lungs, to reproduce itself, because of course viruses are not alive. The only way they can reproduce is hijacking human cells to do that. Well, they were working on making it all the more deadly. They created something called a hybrid, a chimera, a combination, a cut and paste, if you will, using little teeny tiny genetic modification tools. You'll have heard of CRISPR, I'm sure, which cut and pasted genomic sequences from the SARS virus, the HIV virus, and bat coronaviruses to make this hybrid that never in a million years would have developed naturally on its own in nature. Now, there's no question among senior bio defense expert that this coronavirus we're facing, the novel coronavirus, is a genetically engineered biological warfare agent. What I don't know, and what I think we don't know at all yet, is how it got out, how this Frankenstein monster escaped, got out of the lab. Maybe an accident, perhaps an accident, despite everything I just told you about art of war, unrestricted warfare, and so forth. I think that the virus was tweaked, if you will, at the genetic level for communicability. That's why it's so terribly transmissible. It may target specific genetic makeups across a range of population demographics. There are new symptoms popping up among these diverse populations that might indicate mutation. Viruses mutate, that's what they do. But question mark, could the Chinese possibly have achieved mastery over the mutation process? Question mark, I don't know, but that's a good question to look into. Is it also possible, question mark again, that the Chinese have learned how to manipulate the genome sequence without leaving any telltale signs or signatures, or at least that they're so difficult to suss out that our experts have not been able to do that yet? Question mark. All right. I think, and this goes to Michael Pillsbury's 100-year marathon, I think the Chinese were not really ready for this to get out. They were obviously working on a bioweapon, but I don't think they were ready to unleash it on the world because they weren't ready, they weren't prepared completely for the backlash that is now developed across the entire world and the countermeasures that will be taken against them. Let me just conclude here and just say, I think at the top levels of our national security and the bioweaponeers, the bio defense experts at places like USAMRIID, that's Fort Detrick, the United States Army Medical Institute for Infectious Diseases, places like that, they know what the Chinese did and are doing at that laboratory. But the public health community, like Health and Human Services, NIH, National Institutes of Health, CDC, Centers for Disease Control, they might not have the security clearances to have or to know all of that info. I sure don't. So everything I'm telling you is my own speculation and what I have read in open sources. But that is why I think you see the public health officials advising traditional epidemiological control measures, which can be quite stringent. They're looking for the perfect world of shutting down this virus, combined with a very globalist worldview, as we said. But they may not have a complete understanding of what this thing really is or where it may be going. Let me leave it there. I know you'll have questions at the end, and I'll be glad to take those. Thank you.
Great, Claire. Thanks a lot. And you didn't disappoint, as usual. That was great. And, you know, I agree. I think they weren't, the reason I think it was a bioweapon was
Accidental?
Thank you. Accidental release is because of the clumsy way it all came out. You know, they are careless and they are irresponsible in the way they handle those things, and that lab has been cited for that numerous times.
But
But
they
when it
also
comes,
panicked. They
but
panicked and they responded as a
right,
totalitarian, authoritarian regime, which was
exactly,
to deny, to lie, to cover it up,
right,
and then to shift the blame anywhere else in the world except on
exactly,
themselves.
exactly, exactly. And if they had been doing it on purpose, we wouldn't have known where it came from or what happened. They would have been much sneakier, much more underhanded about it. But you know, I want to read one thing, and this is on my campaign blog site. I wrote an article a few days ago titled China's Secret Speech, a Pandemic Plan to Murder 200 Million Americans. And this was a secret speech given by a Chinese general to top levels of the Chinese Communist Party. And here's just a short bit of what he said. Conventional weapons such as fighters, cannons, missiles, and battleships won't do. Neither will highly destructive weapons such as nuclear weapons. We are not as foolish as to want to perish together with the Americans by using nuclear weapons. Only by using non-destructive weapons that can kill many people will we be able to reserve America for ourselves. There has been rapid development of modern biological technology, and new bioweapons have been invented one after another. Of course, we have not been idle. In the past years, we have seized the opportunity to master weapons of this kind. We are capable of achieving our purpose of cleaning up America all of a sudden. Biological weapons are unprecedented in their ruthlessness, but if the Americans do not die, the Chinese have to die. Wow. You know, and that was 2002 or thereabouts. So they've
What about
gone a
3
long
years
way
after
since
this?
then.
Huh?
Yep, yep, yep. And I have that book, and I have the other one too. Sun Tzu's Art of War. The greatest victory is to defeat your enemy without firing a shot. And it is the primary military manual for the Soviet Union, Soviet forces, Soviet Russian military, and the communist Chinese. And in fact, all communist militaries around the country use that as their primary training manual, their primary philosophical military manual, because Sun Tzu said, all warfare is based on deception.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a brilliant tract. Only our special forces and a few other elements of advanced learning in our military actually read that, unless somebody individually takes the initiative to read it. It's something everybody in our military should learn and read and absorb and understand, because that's the kind of enemy we're dealing with. Thanks a lot, Claire. Okay, so next we've got Benjamin Nieuwsma coming up. And Benjamin is the CEO of Navigo, Inc. It's a risk assessment firm, and they have international clients. And they created this beautiful tool for assessing the cost benefit of shutdown versus opening, right down to the county level. And they're working on getting all of their states up and running. Maryland, I believe, was the 5th one that they did, and they did that at my request. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you, Benjamin. They've since added a few more on, I think Michigan, Tennessee, and a couple of others, but they don't have the whole country yet, and they don't because they don't have enough money. So another reason to, well, first of all, let me say, go to my place and donate to me first, and then go to Benjamin's site and donate to theirs. But they need our support, because he's done a beautiful job, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to explain this thing to you and show you how it works. It's really brilliant. So Benjamin, you're on, buddy.
Yeah, Jim, thank you so much. And I'll just give 2 other sentences of background. So a lot of the risk management that we do is in the international travel space. So kind of like the restaurants, you know, they're in a forced kind of shutdown right now. Well, people ain't traveling either. So as far as our bottom line, that makes it a little of an exciting time frame. So that being said, if you want to support what we're doing, we have some buttons directly here on the site, and we would certainly appreciate it. Okay, so the site that we built is called Restart Now, and where we began this journey, we actually initially built a risk assessment for people to be able to understand what their personal risk is of catching coronavirus, and then what it means to them. So both statistically based on caseload, based on transmission in the area, and then personally based on a number of different attributes. The purpose of that was to help triage, you know, medical need and for limited test availability. And then as this started playing out, one of the things that we quickly realized is that there were a number of secondary fallouts that were starting to occur very quickly, economically, suicide, you know, and that information really wasn't making, you know, making the media. It really wasn't being understood, and we were seeing governors just shut down in entire states in a very binary fashion. And so our understanding of this is that this is ill-advised, and it doesn't take into account the incredible geographic and population density diversity that we have in our country. And so this is like you have a light bulb burned out in the room, so you're going to go throw the master breaker for your entire house. Well, there's several easier steps you can take. You could first just go to the breaker panel and just flip the switch for that room. But most rooms are equipped with a masterful device called a light switch. And you can use this light switch, and you can just turn off power to that light bulb, and then you can change that light bulb. And so our expectation of appropriate response in this type of situation is to focus on areas that are risky and to focus on risky subsets of the population. And by doing that, we can allow the rest of the economy to be as healthy as possible. So we built this site that's a data-driven approach that looks at the historic risk in areas, and it helps, it can be a tool to understand, you know, where things can open up very quickly. So you can see we've got a number of extra, you know, we have a number of states that we've built out here. You can visit the site directly. It's restartnow.io. And then again, I just got to here by saying, find your location. And then we're going to click on Maryland.
Hey, Ben,
and that will,
Benjamin,
yes.
can you make the screen for the tool larger, because it's a teeny little thing in the upper corner, and we can't see it.
Oh.
We're seeing you full screen and not that. It should
Here.
be the other way around.
All right, let me do this. I am going to temporarily kill my video. Now, does that make it big?
No, it doesn't. It's still, oh, wait a minute. No,
It
well,
should.
yeah, you could, yeah. You
Okay.
actually turn on, I'm sorry. This is my fault. This is the way I have configured my screen.
Okay.
There you go.
So I'm back.
Yeah, you're back, and you're small, and the model
And I'm
is-
small, and the model's large.
the model's large. Yep, the way it should be.
Okay, great. Well, and mostly you're going to get my profile anyway. So, you know why the Dutch have big noses, right? They found out the air was free. So, anyways, so you know, we have this little bit of a snarky tagline at the top, because one of the models that got used to frighten the governors into shutting everything down said, well, obviously we can't predict the future. We just want you to act quickly. And so, well, we can't predict the future either. We just want to make sure that there is one. So, and at times we've been a little bit dubious. So currently there's a high severity policy in Maryland. So we have the policy information. And then we show a heat map of loss over here. And you can see areas where there's concentrated loss. And then we have a curve here that shows how the loss is playing out. And so at this point, we've got about $33 billion of loss just in Maryland. And then this equates to a modeled job loss, and that's a conservative number. If you look at the very latest numbers, So unlike the scary models that everybody else built, ours is conservative. Theirs were always super scary. Well, ours is scary based on what it's showing, but we're on the conservative side of things. So if you go another month, which it sounds like, I don't remember exactly when you guys were planning on turning things back on, but you would end up with about $54 billion of cumulative loss at the point of your restart, and you would end up with 579,000 jobs lost. And then the other thing that we've looked at is the suicides. And again, we've been very, very conservative in our modeling with this. So there are areas that are showing literally 80x increases in suicide. So 80 times the amount of annualized rates of suicides out of 100,000. And so we're assuming just a 2 times increase. The suicide hotlines are showing anywhere between 200 and 300% increase in most of the country. And so again, we're taking and we're picking the lowest option there. Then what we did is we've ranked all of the different counties based on different statistical metrics of risk within the population, so population demographic information. And what this shows is that, you have, this many dollars lost in low-risk counties, so that's about 19 million, about 10, billion, 19 billion, almost 20 billion, 10 billion lost in your medium-risk counties, and only 5.2 billion lost in your high-risk counties. So what this shows is that, when you compare them, most of the money is lost in areas where there's statistically very low risk. Well, I mean, the obvious thing is, okay, so some people are still scared about the virus. There is caseload in different areas. You have areas where there's, there's population that's at risk, but we can all get behind the fact that you have low population density, low statistical areas of risk, and so those areas need to be open now, regardless of who you are, right? And I would argue, likewise, your medium risk areas. And then let's shift the conversation to, okay, how do we appropriately deal with the high risk areas, right? So when you look at the data, you can see that we've broken this out down to a county level. So you've got your population. We've created a risk score for that population. We give you case information, including deaths. Ignore the recoveries information right now because the data set that we're using for this Johns Hopkins has stopped reporting recoveries, at least through our primary data set through them. So, which is kind of obnoxious. People are actually recovering. So the risks are actually going to start going down across the board as soon as we rewire the recovery info. And then you can see jobs lost again on a county level, and then you can see the dollars lost. And the jobs and dollars lost versus cases, so many of these are just, you get things like this that are totally insane, right? You've got 30,000 people live in Garrett. They're low risk. They've got 4 cases, and they've fired. And these aren't deaths. These are cases, right? Confirmed cases. And you've fired 1,493 people. Right. So what is that? You've fired somewhere around 300 to 400 people per person who got sick. This isn't person in the hospital with the bad case. This isn't fatalities. This is actually just per person. And you'll see that all throughout here where you've got, 55 cases. Here we actually have a few fatalities. But again, we fired thousands of people. Right. And so when you start comparing to some of the secondary impacts like your suicides, you can see how those rates compare. So what we've basically done is we've doubled the fatality rate, but not the way we thought we were. We did the shutdowns, and if you look at the CDC guidelines as far as how to avoid suicides, their number one item on their recommendation list for the community is economic stability, right? And they talk about building, human connections, and so all of people's coping mechanisms, the sports, the racing, the bars, I mean, all of the things that people would normally do to feel better, right? You're telling them not to do that, and on top of that, you're telling them to go isolate. Well, human connection is one of the biggest ways that you can prevent things like suicide, and we're telling them don't do it, right? And so what we've ended up doing in this case is that we've increased our suicide rate beyond the fatality rate from coronavirus in these areas. Well, that doesn't make any sense. We're simply multiplying the fatalities. And so again, we've modeled this all out down to a county level so you can see this. And there are areas where, you know, you will end up with substantially greater numbers of suicides than you have, you know, Washington County, you know, than you have as far as fatalities from the coronavirus. So again, it's really misguided. And that's why we really need to think about, you know, we've got to open up, especially these areas that are low risk, and then move from there. And we need to think about the specific population we need to protect, and not use this exploratory concept of just mass quarantining the healthy folks. As far as our understanding of COVID risk, when you look at this, we've got a number of different types of risks that we're taking into account. There are a number of types that we couldn't actually fit on the chart as well. But you have your population density information. You've got your work interactivity. So this is looking at the job types in the area. So somebody who packs boxes in the back room, low statistical risk of spread just because they're not interacting with people. Baristas and postal workers, higher risk personally to them. And so we look at the makeup of the area. Preconditions and overall health risks. Again, this is things like diabetes, obesity, that kind of thing. And then we've also have a separate index that feeds into this. That's diabetes, including with and without insulin. We have our cardiology and other kinds of information. And then we have our age 60 plus index that looks at how many folks are age 60 plus. So I'm going to butcher the name. Is that Allegheny County? You have 19,000 people, 19,345 who are over 60. When you model out the fatality rate for the virus, you see that it's almost a perfect exponential as far as when you get older. So it models very, very well as an exponential. And so, this is a significant statistical indicator of personal risk from coronavirus. Smoking as well, that's very, very huge. So about 20% of smokers have COPD, and of folks that have COPD, there's about a 50% fatality rate, right? So again, this would be high because population density is okay, your work interactivity is high, your preconditions in the area are high, you have above average, age 60, and you have a whole bunch of people who smoke. Right, so that means that we would anticipate a higher level of fatality in the area based on the demographics of the population. And then we have industry-related information where you can see where the losses are happening, and it's pretty terrifying what we've done to these industries. It's just it's insane. So there's a quick overview, and then if you want to just simulate, okay, let's avoid this here. Let's actually restart now. You can click this button, and then you can see all of these places turn green, and then you lock in the current loss. So we initially made this green, but that made it too happy about, because this is still lost. This is still, Maryland has still lost $33 billion and almost 400,000 jobs, right? And is on track for additional suicides. Things that we plan to do from here. So depending on resources, we would like to also model out violent crime, and then we could show where that is, likely to increase, decrease, substantially on a county by county basis. And then there are other, violence against women, those kind of things. There's a number of other things we could model at the same time. But that's a quick overview of what we've done and a quick overview of Maryland. And hopefully that helps, provide some data that can be used to back up some of the legislators, because it seems like a lot of what happened is there was data on the one side really pushing them with, scary graphs. And so part of our view in doing this was, let's give data so that they can have an informed answer for, okay, well, this is why we've got to take and start opening these areas right now, because here's data. And this data is actually conservative.
Wow, Benjamin, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And I think everybody who's watching can agree that this is a brilliant model. It's a brilliant tool for analyzing the risk versus cost of staying shut down. And it's exactly the kind of thing that each governor needs. It's exactly the kind of thing, frankly, that the White House needs. And as I told you, I've sent it to more than one person at the White House. And one of the president's economic advisors actually has this, and he's on the team that is talking about reopening the country. He's one of the advocates. So hopefully they will utilize this. I think they could benefit, as well as any and all governors could benefit from hearing your presentation on this, because really, to me, when you present it and show how the different indicators work, it's beyond question. You know, for example, you're going to have more suicides than you have deaths from COVID if you keep this county shut down. I mean, that's brilliant. And who could argue with that? You know, because the data that you use is very solid. It all comes from very reputable sources. Yep. And has really, you guys have done a really good job in putting this together. And I only hope it can get out to the governors and the decision makers in an expeditious manner, so that they can finally start making the right decisions about all this, because this blanket lockdown is just absolutely nuts on every dimension. It is absolutely nuts.
Yeah, why are we treating, you know, Bowville, Idaho the same way we're treating downtown New York?
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Exactly. It's crazy. It's just nuts. Well, I'll tell you what, turn off your screen share, and we're going to bring up Dan. Can you please show that video of the Texas rancher? There he is. Just give it a couple of minutes.
Hey everybody, this is Shad Sullivan coming to you from the headwaters of Bitter Creek, Archer County, North Texas. We have to talk. State officials will be assisting to help identify potential alternative markets if a producer is unable to move animals, and if necessary, advise and assist on depopulation and disposal methods. Ladies and gentlemen, we are plowing under vegetable crops from coast to coast. We are euthanizing millions of chickens. We are aborting sows and burying feeder pigs. We are dumping milk by the hundreds of thousands of gallons, and now they are preparing us to depopulate the fat cattle ready to harvest because of a bottleneck created by the effects of COVID. This thing hasn't been created by COVID, but the effects of COVID and the logistics therein. We are in trouble. Our food supply is in trouble, and I am appealing to producers and consumers across the nation to start calling. Yesterday, the first shipment of imported beef from the country of Namibia hit the shores of the United States of America. And yet this morning, they are telling us to prepare to euthanize harvest-ready cattle. Am I the only one that sees a problem in this? It is time we get the American people back to work. It is time we get money flowing. It is time we get food on the shelves. Because if you're not concerned about this food supply problem, you better be. We have a huge supply and demand of food across this nation. We can feed the world ourselves, and yet we're destroying our harvests. At the same time, we are importing beef from other countries, beef that is less regulated than our beef, less safe, not as high quality a product, and yet it's happening. At the same time, they are preparing for us to euthanize our harvests.
Thank you. Now I'd like to bring on my buddy Mike Elmore. Mike, can you get some more light in your room? It's really dark in there.
Unfortunately, I really can't, and we have a storm coming through.
Oh.
And we may get disconnected of thunderstorms coming through right now. So
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I've got a light on here, but
All right.
well,
So-
anyway, that's a hard act to follow. Yeah. What I'd like to say is Jim sent me an email and asked me, is this as bad as it looks? And I emailed him back. Actually, I called him. I said, yes, it actually is. And we have a biosecurity problem with the beef industry, the chicken and the pork industry that no one even knows about it. We have a distribution problem that is so vulnerable through the trucking and how cattle go to market. And where I met Jim 7 years ago before that, but I had him help me. I was an activist for the refugee resettlement program, trying to keep that from happening in Wyoming. Wyoming was the last state that didn't have a refugee resettlement program. So Jim helped me with some editing on some speeches and some things that we did to try to stop that, which we were successful at doing that. But because of that, I learned an awful lot about the meatpacking companies and what they do and how they run their business, which I wasn't even aware of as being a rancher in Northeast Wyoming. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I'm not a gentleman rancher. I am a rancher, and it's hard work, it's dirty work, it's risky, and it's dangerous, and it's heartbreaking. And so all of this is really pulls on, really, I don't know how to say it, but it's worse than what we really think it is. And I'll tell you, what that gentleman was just talking about was importing beef. We have not been able to get to Congress. At one time we had it, but they did away with it. It was called COOL. It was the County of Origin Labeling. And that means where was the beef produced? And we used to be able to say produced in the United States. And we have beef that comes from Canada, it comes from Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and all it has to do to come into America is be processed through one of the meatpacking plants, and then it's produced in the United States, which is completely mislabeling, and it's terrible for the beef supply for America. We have a biosecurity risk on cattle, and especially on pork and chickens, that people don't understand. I mean, if you really knew how the diseases were caused and what the diseases were transferred from people walking into farrowing pigs or farrowing pens and what have you, you wouldn't believe it. What we have in the cattle business, though, let me get to the point, is I'm a cattle rancher. I raise cows, my cows and calves. I take calves, they go to a market to somebody that'll take them, and they'll put 300 or 400 pounds on them, and then they'll go from 300, 400 pounds, then they'll go into a finishing feedlot operation where they'll feed them corn, they'll finish them out to 1,200, 1,400 pounds, then they send them to a packer. Now the packing companies are right now been demanded to go back to work through the Defense Production Act that President Trump signed. Now the problem with all that is they'll never get it going like it should have been because of the social distancing. And you've all seen packing plants, they're shoulder to shoulder, people are right there, and they have got to do something about that because no one's going to go back to work worrying about getting the COVID virus. Now, what's going to happen is I'm kind of a believer in the fact that the progressive leftists would like nothing better than to shut down this economy and make sure that President Trump never gets reelected. And this is something that is going to work out perfectly for them because you're going to see people that will not go back to work. They'll go on strike. The first time that somebody says they get sick and they die because they're forced to go back to work, the class action lawsuits there that'll even be worse. They'll shut everything down. And so we've got this problem there's no shortage of beef. And yes, that gentleman was right. They haven't quite started killing fat cattle yet, and there is no shortage of beef. It's just a matter of distribution. And I don't know how that's going to stop until we get the packing plants going. And I don't think the packing plants are going to get going again for the very fact that the people that work there are people that have come in from refugee resettlement program. They're the people that have come from Mexico and all around the world, and that's where they put them so that they work for nothing. These people will live in houses where there's 4 or 5 people living in there, and so the spread of the coronavirus is really, really tough to stop. There's not like me. I can social distance real easy, and I think most of you folks can too, by just the mere fact that we have nice houses and we have places and lots of space. But those people can't, and the whole industry is run by, the people that run this are usually people that are immigrants, illegal immigrants, not necessarily illegal, I don't want to say that, but that's the point why we want open borders. The refugee resettlement people have been employed there because it's not a job that a lot of people want to do. I know I could go on, and this has probably gone on long enough. The food supply is in danger because of the vulnerability on all these steps where meat is produced. The meat produced in United States, where meat is packaged. There's 4 packing companies in America that produce over 80% of the packaged good for beef, 4 of them. And 2 of them are owned by companies that aren't even American companies. So I'm just going to leave you with this. We're only 5 meals away from being uncivilized. And if that happens and people become hungry, which is a crisis, like Rahm Emanuel said, you got to have a crisis. It's the best thing. Don't let a crisis go to waste. This is what they'll strive to do. They're never going to, I don't think that they will let the beef packing companies get full production like we want them to do. Legal issues and what have you. So when you talk about civil liberties and how that's going to happen and what's going to happen through that, well, that's anybody's guess. And that's about all I have to say. And it's not for me, as somebody that has to do risk management constantly, the worst case scenario is just what I've always worried that's happening, and it's about to happen. Now, you can always go out and probably get tomato soup and canned soup and things like that, but the meat supply is a real potential for the meat supply to be shut down.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And now you all know why I asked Mike to come on, because he's there on the ground and he has to deal with this issue every day, and he sees it from one end of the business to the other. And so, well, thank you all for your presentations. I thought we'd have unmute everybody and bring everybody back, and we'd have a roundtable discussion. There are a number of questions some of the viewers have asked, and perhaps some of you would be willing to address those. Have you brought everybody back on? Yes, I guess you have. Okay. So let's see. Let me see gallery view. All right, there we are. I'm still trying to figure out how this stupid Zoom thing works. So Jeff asks, Sheriff Jenkins, where do you and the Frederick County Sheriff's Department stand on interposing on behalf of citizens in protecting and defending their constitutional rights and their ability to freely exercise them that actually run counter to the unconstitutional mandates issued by Governor Hogan? Whoa, that's a tough one.
That's one of those gotcha. But listen, I think I made myself pretty clear. So far, we don't know where this is going to go. Again, we have been asked to. I haven't had to enforce anything yet. Let me put it like that. So it's been a situation where we have gone out and explained to people who are listen. People know how to take care of themselves. They understand. We present the reasoning why these orders exist. We ask them through compliance. Okay, absolutely through compliance to this point, to cooperate, adhere to the orders. So far, they've done that. I'm willing to make a stand if it comes to that, okay, to protect the citizens' rights. I hope this ends before it goes much further, because again, I see people becoming really impatient about this, especially people who are losing their livelihoods, people who are restricted from traveling where they want to do or go do things they want to do, the recreation. And like Mike said, I mean, people are only a few days away from being in pretty bad shape, either financially, food, whatever the case may be. So again, it's a difficult situation to put law enforcement in. It's a difficult situation to put a sheriff in. But I'm sworn to uphold the Constitution. I intend to do that.
That's fantastic, Chuck. Thank you. Okay, I think that question was handily answered. Let's see. Gino asks, how do we respond to our state and local government officials regarding the unconstitutionality of their restrictive policies? Well, that's another tough one. Sheriff Mack, you want to tackle that one?
Well, we certainly have civil disobedience at our disposal. I totally agree with one of the greatest examples of that. I mentioned her before, Rosa Parks. But the thing that I bring out with Rosa Parks is she was arrested by 2 peace officers in this country, in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. Two peace officers who swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. What should those 2 cops have done? They should have sat down next to her and escorted her home safely when she got off the bus, and then provide her and her family with extra patrol during the night and the subsequent days. So but also tell them, look, I hope you have a gun in your home, because we won't be able to be here 24/7. And if you need to protect yourselves from whomever might be coming after you because of what Rosa did, then you let your conscience be your guide. See, that is a constitutional sheriff, that he's protecting these people and he's protecting their individual liberty. That needs to be the same thing we're doing today. If a minister is trying to hold church, the sheriff should be there guarding his right and protecting them from anybody from the state or the county or the city from coming and making arrests or issuing citations. How ridiculous can we get that a sworn guard of the Constitution could do such a thing? And what a great lesson from our constitutional sheriffs in this country to let people know in the county and in their jurisdiction what we do with such laws. The same thing that we should have done to the law that Rosa Parks was arrested for. We put stupid laws in the trash and we stand for the God-given law, God-given liberties that are protected by the supreme law of the land. And so to me, it's not that difficult. We just got to see the whole picture here, and that liberty is the ultimate goal for all of us in all 3 branches of government. It's not enforcement. It's liberty. And if we start understanding that, we're going to see a huge difference in how laws are enforced in this country.
And, you know, I think a lot of people, and I didn't know this before I really met you and talked with you and understood what your mission was, that, you know, the sheriff really is the supreme law enforcement officer in the state. So the sheriff is not beholden to elected officials or other government levels of government. Although I think that varies by state. Like I think in Delaware, for example, and Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In Delaware, there was a guy who wanted to do things this way, and the legislature just came in and basically neutered the entire sheriff's department and made it an irrelevancy.
Right. They do, and you're finding more. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim, but you're finding more and more local governments who are trying to seize and undermine the authority of the sheriff, not only state to state, but county to county. But listen, the sheriffs are in jeopardy across the country. The more you see executive authorities like governors, like county executives, exercise that authority and try to undermine and create their own police forces, they try to take a lot of that authority away from the sheriffs. And that's really going on from coast to coast right now, a lot of different states.
Yeah, right.
Politicians don't like their sheriffs being independent.
Right.
They don't like the fact that we serve the people.
Correct.
Right. So let's see, another question here. Okay, so that one's taken care of. How is the judiciary going to handle the legality of many of these quarantine-related charges and fines? Jackie asks. That's, I think, anybody's guess. Sheriff Mack?
Well, we're already seeing that. One state has upheld them. Another state judge has rescinded them and said they went too far. So it needs to hurry up and get to the Supreme Court. But I will say this, every sheriff does not need to ask permission from the courts. We should be doing our jobs, the courts notwithstanding. We don't have to ask permission from the courts to keep our oath of office. Let's take care of that without going to the courts.
Let's see. Jackie says, in support of Claire's comments regarding the R&D activity and the COVID-19 and Chinese bleaching operations that started after the outbreak. Oh, she puts in an address for my friend. Yes, very good article that she references here. I'll post it up on Facebook after we're done. Can't do anything about it right now. Mike asked, Tyson Food and other meat packers have had numerous problems with pieces of plastic, bits of other material contained in their products that have had to be recalled. Any of this possible sabotage by these foreign refugees? Tyson reportedly has hired over 1,000 employees from Somalia and Pakistan. I don't know that it would be sabotage. I would say more likely it's carelessness and shoddy work practices. Mike, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I believe that's true. No, I think that's true. And there's something that I think, everybody wants to come to America. Everybody wants to be in America. But then you have to question, where's their loyalty? Do they want to be Americans? Right. And that's where we're running into things. And I'm not so sure all the refugees and the people that come here, and we see this all the time. They're nationalists from other countries. And I think my internet is really going unstable. Can you still hear me?
Oh, yeah, you're doing fine.
Oh, okay, because it keeps coming up that it's unstable. But no, I think what we're going to have happen is, again, these people that come in, they're beholden to the left and the progressive left, and all they're going to have to do is cause a problem and they're still unionized, and you're going to see people. Now, I already heard about this today, that there was 50 employees, and I think it might have been Swift Farms. It's another Hong Kong conglomerate that's not in America, that they went on strike, and they're not about to go to work until they know that they can have the safest conditions possible. And that's just not going to happen. The social distancing that we all see is 6 foot apart in a slaughterhouse. And so you just mark my word, this will not bode well for the people in agriculture. And that's everybody. It's not just the people that are the cow-calf operation or the feeder operation and the feedlot operators. It's going to be the farmers that produce the corn and the vets. And I mean, it's a big industry, and it's going to really, I just believe that they're going to want to see a crisis, at least through the election, because that's a tough one for Donald Trump to go in and make people go to work. And the litigation will be unbelievable. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I definitely agree that the left.
I don't think that I don't think that. Yeah, there's a lot of bad beef that comes out, and and that's the other thing about the truth in labeling. America produces the best beef, and I'm going to just put a shout out for American beef and American farmers. We have the cleanest, safest, best product in the world. And when you can bring product in here, and you don't know what kind of vaccine program, hoof and what is it?
Hoof and mouth.
Hoof and rot disease. Mouth disease is one that they have to worry about. And there's no checking that. Now, when that comes into United States, the same thing with the swine virus that comes in. These are things that if we can't control this not through immigration, but through FDA. Dealing with the trade, this could even get worse. Yeah. That's what's dangerous.
Here's a question, another question for you, Mike. Why is it necessary to kill, destroy, discard items in our food system instead of holding the beef until system is back, giving away the food instead of plowing under, and then the government to buy the storehouse as it does for other commodities? And you answered that question to me today.
Yeah, it's a perishable product, and I don't think people understand that. You get a fat cow fat cattle, they're ready to butcher at 1,400 pounds. I mean, you can't keep putting fat on them, because there comes a point where then it becomes no longer, you're not going to go get the grade choice and prime. You have to get these things butchered at the right time. It's like the pigs. They're at 300 pounds. They need to be butchered. If they go over that, then they're no different than a cull cow. They don't have the bacon. It's not bacon, it's fat. So you have to do something with it. And there's no way that as a rancher, it's like I'm in Gillette, Wyoming. No, I mean, they're not going to, people, I can't sell enough beef in Gillette, Wyoming to make this thing work. It has to go through a distribution process from the producer to the feedlot operator to the packer to the grocery stores and the trucking. I didn't even mention the trucking process, because there's trucking involved in every one of those. That's why it has to be like that. And it's perishable, and it's not that easy. And that's what they do. They have to plow them under, because the distribution won't work.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Brenda says, even though we don't know if China did this deliberately, this all seems too convenient. Trump put a huge tariff on China. Our economy is going gangbusters. Dr. Fauci is recorded as saying in 2017 that Trump would have a major pandemic during his administration. This is an election year, and they wanted to destroy Trump by this. Please comment. You want to comment, Claire?
Sure. I mean, the truth is that just about every president has a pandemic, so it's not a tough prediction to make.
Right.
Pandemics come all the time. We certainly had them, for the last couple of presidencies, and going back in history, pandemics arise on a regular basis, unfortunately. Do the Chinese have it in for us, the Chinese communist regime? Absolutely, yes. Do I think this thing got out on purpose? I do not think that right now. And again, my reason for that is that while I believe they created it on purpose in a BW laboratory, I don't think they were ready for it to be released. There's a concept in Chinese culture called shu. And shu means you take advantage of the flow of events in a way that works to your best advantage, and you do not let the enemy know even that you are his enemy until the time is right that you can achieve victory, perhaps without firing a shot. They weren't there yet. They weren't at that point. I think they screwed up their shoe. That's my personal opinion, and I'm not a China expert very much. I'm getting there. But I think this was an accident. And I think that other evidence of that is the panicked way that they responded after it got out. I mean, that was pure panic. That was not scheduled.
They literally locked people in their apartments and nailed the doors shut, and people starved to death in their apartments rather than spread. I mean, that's how bad these people are. But, all that being said, and I agree with you, Claire, all that being said, the left has never let this crisis go to waste, and they are exploiting it for everything it's worth. And I guarantee you that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats would love to see our economy totally collapse. They would love to see the presidency totally destroyed, just for the sole purpose of having better chances in November. They're willing to sacrifice our country, our rule of law, every element that keeps this country alive and makes it great. They would be happy to destroy, and they're drooling over the prospects so that they can hopefully take power in 2020. And once again, that's why I'm running, and that's why a lot of us are running, and that's why this year is the most important year, I believe, in my lifetime, perhaps throughout our entire nation, for us to win. Everybody should be involved in one way or another. If you can, you should run for office. If you're not going to run for office, you should do volunteer work for people that you support. You should definitely be regularly donating. Here I go again. Another shameless pitch for my donation button on my website. But seriously, folks, this is critical. And literally, the Democratic left, they are no longer the Democrat Party. They have abandoned the Democrat Party a long time ago. And I wish my Democratic friends would get it through their heads and understand that, because these people are not Democrats. They're socialists, and many of them are actually really communists. And they are better related, better friends with our enemies than they are with us. They'll be happy to see the Chinese communists come in or the Russians come in, because they think that they're going to be buddy and buddy up to them and be right there with them when and if they take over. They're not afraid of that, but we sure as heck should be, because really we are facing a domestic enemy today. And let's see, we've got Mike asked, with China's animosity toward America, can we really trust any of their products anymore? Like, no, we can't, and we never could, honestly. Well, we probably could at first, because they wanted to get all of their products to our market and get that all established. But now once they're there, you know, for example, our military purchases, or at least used to purchase, its high-tech microchips from Chinese manufacturers for military application. And the Chinese put a little Trojan backdoor in every one of those. So all the military jets flying around had a little Trojan backdoor in there that the Chinese could have activated at any time. And I guarantee you, if those chips had stayed in those jets and we faced a confrontation with China, one of their military leaders would have turned on a switch, flipped a switch, and you would have watched jet fighters falling out of the sky. That's the kind of thing they were doing. And fortunately, we found it and we replaced them. But that's the kind of stuff that we can expect from them. It was always a mistake. It was a snake. Started, I hate to say, by George H.W. Bush, but mostly Bill Clinton and President Obama really put it on steroids to send our industrial base over to China, and it's really hurt us. Let's see. I think we got one more question. Okay, Sheriff Mack, Harold asks, is it actually civil disobedience that we're to exercise, or are we actually exercising our civil obedience?
Well, as I said earlier, defiance of tyranny is obedience to God, and that's who we're supposed to obey. And that's where I put my allegiance and my obedience. And my wife isn't listening right now, so I don't have to say I obey her. I might have been sheriff, but she was always the boss. No, it is civil disobedience, and we do not support violence. This isn't a revolution, it's a restoration. And it can be done peacefully. Imagine how wonderfully successful and impactful civil disobedience would be in this country when your sheriff and his deputies are marching with you. Yeah, it's a good security team to have around, but it's also a good message to the world that we believe in civil disobedience and we believe in liberty, and our founding fathers risked everything for it, and they committed acts of violence to obtain it. And I'm not against dying for freedom and liberty, but I believe that there is a peaceful means available to us, and we must exhaust all of those. So let's be real clear on that. And also I would add this. I would invite everybody, all of you, Claire and Mike and Jim, all of you, Sheriff Jenkins, everybody can join the CSPOA. Let's all become a member of the CSPOA. Get on our website and get on our email list.
I am a member.
Oh yeah, you already are. And everybody, become a member, become a part of this. Get those little booklets get a bunch of these. There's some people that hand these out when they campaign, and they say, see, the states have an effective role in the check and balance system. And the 10th Amendment is alive and well, and the states need to be enforcing it. And if you ever want to stop forced vaccinations, you better have your local authorities and your sheriffs educated about how to stop that. And so there's a lot of scary things going on, but we need to remember that this is an act of love and patriotism and love for freedom. And I hope that we get back to that. So everybody go to CSPOA, stands for Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org, and make a donation there. But first donate to Jim, and then join the CSPOA. But get these books. There 5 of these for $10. And they're so powerful because it's a one time that you'll see the crisis of the day was ruled against by the United States Supreme Court.
Great. Thank you, Sheriff. And I think that's a great statement, great way to wrap up. Oh, wait a minute.
Hey, Jim, I got 2 here online if you can.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this might be a question for Mike. Well, you know what? Let's go back to the sheriff for a second.
Okay.
This is right there. With regarding to protests that are going on, this is from a friend of ours here in Ohio. She was concerned about, doesn't understand what grounds people get arrested for. What crime are they actually committing? Specifically, are they being charged with criminal trespass, disturbing the peace? Does it stay on their record? Are they resisting arrest? I mean, what are they doing if they're just going to a protest and getting?
Well, most of those fall into the category of pride arrests or stupid arrests, and the enforcement of stupid laws is the essence of tyranny. And we need to make sure we're not stupid cops enforcing stupid laws.
Right.
And if they have a right to peaceably assemble, and they're not breaking any other law, and they're not hurting anybody else, then we need to leave them alone, and we need to protect their right to protest and peaceably assemble. That supersedes any order from any governor. And so it's all about our rights as individuals in this country.
But I'll tell you, I think that a lot of police departments defer to whatever their senior elected person is, and they'll find a statute. Like, for example, I think I saw they were arrested for disturbing the peace.
Or disorderly conduct.
Yeah,
That's
disorderly conduct. Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly. And it's bogus, but it's like a fig leaf protection.
Did you know that was actually what Rosa Parks was charged with? Disorderly conduct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. The other question I have is with regards to that Defense Production Act that President Trump authorized the other day about the meat packers to stay open, the processing plants to stay open. Now, like Mike said, 5 meals away from civil unrest, would it be a case that the National Guard actually goes in and is the labor force to, keep it open to avoid that? That's the question.
That's an interesting question. Who knows?
Mike is muted right now.
Yeah, Mike, he's
Well,
muted.
I don't know what that is. It?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
I think we're losing him.
I don't think there's enough National Guard to go in and actually. I mean, you take the small pig processing plant over here in South Dakota. They had 3,700 people. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are employed by the processing plants, and that I'm not aware of what that entails as far as how many National Guards that we have, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. I really don't. There's not enough of them. That's my opinion, and it's based on I don't know.
This is Sheriff Jenkins. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I've lost my video, but I wanted to add something. So I've had the privilege of being involved in the program for about 3 years now at the Army War College. And the whole program involves what is the role of the military or the National Guard to support local law enforcement in the event of a catastrophic incident, similar to what we're seeing now. And I can tell you, there are only certain roles that the National Guard are actually prepared to perform, and I really don't think that would be one of them.
Yeah.
Right. Here's an interesting little comment, the last comment. Bill Gates, breaking news, Bill Gates, and I don't know the veracity of this comment, but Mike says Bill Gates and food corporations worked to end livestock production, pushed lab-grown meat. And Mike, you talked about that a little bit earlier. Lab-grown meat.
Well, I talked about that. Well, I talked about that because our family's been here ranching for 130 years.
Yeah.
And I've never been so pessimistic about it because you have that's coming along, and I think that'll happen someday. I really do. I mean, it's just technology, and then you have the new Green Deal with the AOC and her ilk that they would love to destroy the cattle operation. Anything that would do away with cattle operations, beef production, and it's not a very good business right now. I can tell you, I'm at a point where I really have to think that this might be an existential threat to our livelihood. It's about 60% down from what it was, the cattle market was, from what it was 6 years ago, I believe. I mean, it's terrible. There's going to be a lot of people go broke, and I just hope that I hope I can hang on. That's all I can say, because it's not looking good for the beef producers. And this is just one more nail in the coffin. But I do believe that someday they'll probably have that ability, at least for hamburgers. Nobody's going to produce a big New York strip, you know, and in a petri dish, but they probably will do hamburger and stuff like that. I see that happening. Another reason to get out of the cattle business.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much, everybody, for participating. It's been great to have you. I think this was really, really powerful presentation. And we are going to record this, and it will be available. I hope we can put it on YouTube. But we are going to record it and make it available. So for those who didn't see it, we can share it. And for those who tuned in on Facebook Live, thanks a lot for coming. And thank you all for being with us tonight. And one last shameless plug, go to my website, jimsimpson4congress.com, and please hit that donate button. If everybody on this call were to do that, we would be, it would probably assure my victory in the primary. And then the general is a whole nother story, a whole nother can of worms we got to tackle. But I'm ready to do it with your support. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. And Mike, you keep up your great work. And Chuck and Sheriff Mack and Claire, everybody, thank you all for coming. Good night.
Thank you, Jim. Good luck.